Thanks, Andrew, for taking the time out of what is no doubt a busy day to talk to us at Grace Papers. Do you want to give some background to your career and how you got to where you are?
Sure. Well, not by any long-range planning, I can assure you of that, but I grew up in the Adelaide Hills. I studied university in Adelaide and I joined a firm called PricewaterhouseCoopers in the late 80s. I travelled all around the world with PricewaterhouseCoopers, worked in more than 40 countries, lived in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, and came back to Melbourne in 2001. And then in 2008, I joined National Australia Bank, and I've been on the leadership team here for some years, and I run the wealth division, and we play a very big part in the lives of everyday Australians, and I love that about it. So it might look like a random walk, particularly if you took a world map and saw where I'd been, but from a career perspective, I've been very fortunate to often fall in the right place at the right time.
You've got 3 children, older now. What's the makeup at home?
So, daughter Catherine, son Michael, daughter Rachel. And Catherine was born in Kenya when we were working in Kenya. That was a big and wonderful change in our lives. And Catherine's now 22, Michael's 20, Rachel's 18. And the kind of exciting challenges of recent times has been teaching them to drive and things like that. That's a far cry from the things we used to do when they were little. It's all great. I love fatherhood.
And I guess when you became a father 22 years ago, what was expected of you and your role at that time?
When I look back on that time, I think about all the conversations we actually didn't have, because there were major repercussions for us as a family unit, because my wife trained as a physiotherapist, and then we found in going to Kenya that there wasn't really a physiotherapy market for expatriates. So my wife was out of the workforce at that time, becoming a stay-at-home mother during that period of time. And I can't actually remember a signature conversation we had where we said, we're at this fork in the road and this is how we'll work it out, and I'll keep on working and you'll stay at home, and and we didn't really have that interchange of conversation. It's like that was kind of how things were done, so we sort of drifted into it. I think if we had our time again now, we would have had a whole bunch of conversations at that time that we didn't have. Now, fortunately, in many ways, lots of things have worked out, wonderfully well, but we didn't really have that intent and conversations around choice, and I don't think we realised the various choices that we had back then. So we simply went through the process of, Catherine was born, I kept on working, Pam established the family unit at home, which then Michael was born in Brisbane, Rachel was born in Perth, and so it went through for many years. So I try to convince the kids today that I changed 50% of their nappies when they were young, and they respond pretty much how you just did just then. I try to rewrite the pages of history, but I get absolutely nowhere quite rightly on that.
If you had your time again, what conversations would you be having?
Well, I think we would have had it really from the first moment in Kenya, perhaps even before arriving in Kenya. I don't think we realised in going to Kenya that Pam's working trajectory would be affected because as a physiotherapist, there were hospitals in Kenya. We had lived in London prior to that, and Pam had some great jobs in London in physiotherapy. So I don't think we really counted the cost of that in the initial decision. And we didn't have conversations to work out, well, how are we together in partnership going to work our way through this? What does it mean for our respective careers? How are we both going to stay in the workforce? What are our dreams? All those kind of questions. We just, as I say, sort of drifted through. And I shouldn't really blame the culture or the times or anything. As I say, if I could go back in time or whatever, then we'd do things differently. But that'd be the sort of conversations we would have had, and I think we would have come up with more understanding of what our choices were. And I don't know whether we would have made a different decision or not, but I think we would have been in a stronger position for having had those conversations.
What surprised you most about becoming a father?
I think how wonderful it is. I've got great relationships with all 3 kids. They're amazing children. I think about fatherhood. I try to be a great father every day, just the fun that we have together. I talk about it sometimes with either staff members or friends who are about to enter fatherhood, and I just tell them it's the most wonderful. I think probably the only thing that beats fatherhood is motherhood, but fatherhood's an amazing bond, which obviously is a lifelong bond, and highly recommend it to everyone.
When you think about gender equality in terms of your journey, what surprised you most about gender equality or inequality?
Well, I think about it more and more. For example, I've just been on holidays. We had a family holiday, and I was talking about this with Catherine because she's studying psychology at the moment, and she was doing an assignment on gender equality. And she started reading to me her answers of, what it's like to be a young woman in today's societies. And she raised things that I hadn't even thought about. For example, I can go running at 6 a.m. in the morning in various parts of town that Catherine wouldn't think to. And in fact, as a father, I'd be saying, don't do that. But it's not something I've specifically thought about. So gender equality, you can get into an easy definition on it, which says, well, there's equally valued, equally represented, equally paid, lots of important words around that. But I think equality for me, for the most part, I equate with choice. And I would like to think that similar choices and similar outcomes should occur for men and women, right throughout the world. And having travelled the world, I've seen a lot of different societies where the cultures are extraordinary. I've been into Pakistan. I've been in countries where growing up as a woman, choices are very few. And so for me, probably the strongest word I equate with equality is choice, and the ability to be powerful in making choices and achieving outcomes.
When we talk about gender equality, we often assume that it is just about women. What's in it for men?
Well, I also oversee a life insurance business, and I can tell you that there's not equality in life expectancy of men and women because women live on average 3 or 4 years longer than men. So that's one statistic in society. But equality, if you relate it to choices, is just as powerful a concept and a reality for men as it is for women. As I say, I drifted into where my working life went at the time that Catherine was born, and later with Michael and Rachel and so on. So it's sort of a sliding doors moment. If Pam and I had those sort of conversations the way I'd highly recommend occur today, then that could have created something different for both of us. So it could have affected the way I'd live my life from then. So I think choice is a really important reality for both men and women. And that plays out today. We talked for many years about getting maternity leave right and ensuring that women return to work in the right way, and promotions and trajectories. And now there's a broader focus too on parental leave, because it's very important for men to engage with fatherhood from the first moment. And we highly recommend here at NAB that our staff take parental leave, take all the advantages of parental leave, and come back stronger, more fulfilled, more happy. We know there's a big link between personal happiness and work productivity, and to engage in fatherhood, well, there can't be many happier things you can do in the world than that.
When we talk about taking parental leave and obviously having the flexibility to do so, we know that there's still a considerable stigma attached to flexibility. What do you think is going to change that?
Well, I think what you've got is a fragmentation. You've got policy making and leadership which occurs at the top of organisations. And so at NAB, when I think of our executive team here, there is absolutely no stigma whatsoever. In fact, there's an absolute encouragement for staff members right through the organisations, including members of the executive committee, to take parental leave, etc. So you've got that sort of leadership and policy layer. Then you've got the individual themselves who can start to feel a stigma, and then perception becomes reality. You know, I've had many friends working 4 days a week that are sort of awash with guilt of working 4 days a week, and I think it's just fantastic that they're doing that, and always for absolutely great reasons. But there's a stigma that can come within the thoughts of the individual, and then it's the workplace around them and how they're responding. You know, if I'm working 4 days a week, maybe I've put more of a burden on the people working around me and all those kind of interplays. But if I stand back from all of that and you think about workplace culture today versus, you know, 1994 and 95 that I was talking about earlier on, the change that we need to get to is where this is all just so normal. The opposite of stigma is normality. And I think we're in that transition stage on so many of these issues where we know the direction of where we need to get to. We're not getting there fast enough and more fully within what is a fragmented work system. And we need it to become part of everyday life. And whether we're 5, 10, 15 years away from that, I know on gender pay people talk about we're longer away from that, so we need to work much faster. But we can't get there quickly enough because it does need to become a normality.
When you look at the Human Rights Commission report, which they released a few years back, which says 1 in 2 women experience some form of pregnancy-related discrimination and 1 in 4 men, as a leader, what would you be saying to individuals in terms of empowering them to call it out or how they might address it?
Well, the first thing I'd say is there's an awareness piece in this. Sometimes I know people will look back and see that they've been experiencing discrimination, but at the time it's just been a gradual, it may not be punctuated by certain points, but there can be this drift downwards. And in a world where people are busy and looking around, what have you, suddenly there's this cry for help when it's got to quite an elevated stage. So there's the awareness piece, there's the elevation piece, because we know that where some of that discrimination occurs will be at the people leader level. And so then within organisations we think hierarchically, is it right to go one level above or is it right to elevate right to the top? Now I can tell you in today's society we have customers writing every day, they write to me. I'm not hard to find on email. They don't mind just going straight to the top to get something done, and I think nothing could be more important than a staff member's livelihood. Like, I hate discrimination. I can't tell you strongly enough, I hate discrimination. So if individuals are experiencing discrimination, the ability to reach out above the people leader level, whether it's right to the top, whether it's through the various mechanisms that we have within the organisation, it's important to call it out. And then it's important to work through in partnership, how do we actually address this? Because sometimes individuals will say, well, it must be this workplace, so I'll leave this organisation, go over there, but then they find the grass is not greener over there. So better to work on it and solve it within the workplace, I think.
You mentioned the gender pay gap before, and obviously running a wealth business, you would understand the impact of parental leave on particularly a woman's super balance. What can people do at this point in time to close the gap around that from an individual perspective?
Well, many things. I do have both reality and hope here, so I'll speak to the reality. I oversee one of Australia's biggest retail superannuation organisations, and the data is very clear that the super balances of women are about, on average, 55-60% of male balances if you go to all the various age demographics. And that's not right, is it? Whatever way you look at that, that's not right. And when you overlay with that, as I mentioned earlier, that women live longer than men, actually maybe it'd be better if it was the other way around, given you know how far that money's got to go into the future. Having said that, the hope side of this is that in the 25 to 40 year age demographic, wealth of women is the fastest growing demographic. So that shows we're making progress. But it's just until we have equality, we have not achieved. We're headed in a direction, which is a good direction, but we're not getting there fast enough. I think there's a lot of people now focusing, though, that this fast-growing demographic is something exciting for the Australian economy. If we can unleash and unlock gender pay equality, workforce participation, etc., it does great things for individuals, does great things for the economy, and helps set up Australians for retirement. Our studies show that for women, they either don't think about superannuation. 1 in 3 women aren't adding anything on top of any workplace superannuation, or they feel anxious about it. Now, my strong belief on this is that there are various life moments where it's best to reach out and get some quality financial advice. And so when I think of that moment of pregnancy where the whole world's about to change, that's a great moment to find great financial advice, because that will stand women in great stead for many years to come. I don't want women in Australia to have 60% of the superannuation balance of men.
And obviously that helps the wealth creation of the family unit, which supports men in this stage as well.
That's right. And it comes back to choice, because the average age of women having a baby is 29, the average age of men is 33. You've already got a gap there. You add on top of that, and on average 18% pay equity gap. So you've got a double whammy there on gap. As this gets addressed, decisions can be made on, as I say, I'm really strong on choice here. When I look back, actually, for my wife and I, if we'd had conversations at that time, it may be that I would have established a career at 3 days a week, my wife 3 days a week. We could have worked our way through. Maybe as a household we would have earned less money, I'm not sure, but it would have been based on our choice, and certainly it would have helped the dynamics of the family unit. So it's not necessarily just an overall numbers game. I think it still comes back to individual choice of what individuals want to do. But what we do know is that once you're out of the workforce, it's that much harder to get back in. For my wife, she, having been out of the workforce in physiotherapy, it's a very hard road to come back 20 years later into the world of physiotherapy. The craft moves on. The re-entry rules and procedures are quite onerous, for good reasons, I'm sure. But what it means is once you're out, hard to get back in, and that's where the economy can suffer quite a bit.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for workplaces in achieving gender equality?
The biggest challenge for workplaces in addressing gender equality, I think, is the multifaceted approach that's required to lift the workplace, lift participation, lift the nation. If you look at, for example, the demographics of the workplace, we haven't yet got enough role models in a world where we've reached sort of 30% of senior management being female compared to the obvious requirement to get to 50%. That means that there's this gap of role models, let alone people coming through, because what we find, and what I've found over many years of my career, is there's this fragmentation that happens. So firstly, there's the overall demographics and the lack of role models. Secondly, we know that there's unconscious bias throughout the system, and unconscious bias is like a disease that you can't just sort of put in an injection and it all goes away. It actually is, it permeates around the place, and in ways that you often can't see. That's why it's called unconscious. It's not always so obvious. Sometimes it is very obvious, but sometimes it's not so obvious. So that requires a multifaceted approach. You can raise policy, as we do, to try to stamp it out, but it just keeps popping up here or popping up there or popping up there. Then you get to the individual awareness and people. This is a broader cultural society point, but people not feeling powerful in that situation to address it, and so starting to themselves step back. You know, it's well documented that women often will look at the 9 requirements for a job and they think I've only got 6 of them, so I won't apply. And meanwhile, there's, alpha male men that have got 2 of the 9 that say, of course I can do that. And, there's those kind of things that play out. So it's not a silver bullet approach. It's something that does take time. I've just raised 3 points there, but I could raise another 10 or 12. And to fully address this, you're only as good as your weakest link on all those points. And I think that's why it's taking society so much time to progress to where we need to get to. We've come a fair way. I think sometimes it can seem, I was going to say sacrilegious, probably not the right word, but it can seem disingenuous to talk about the progress we've made, because it sounds like, oh, well, it's time to rest on. I can tell you I'm not happy about 30% representation in senior management ranks of females. So, and yet I'm happy to talk about the progress we've made from when it was 23%. And I'll be happy to talk about the progress when it gets to 40%. But I'll be, pleased, delighted and relieved, when it reaches 50%. But I think there is something about we actually don't talk about the progress as much as we should, because we do feel that we need to maintain the rage. But I think talking about the progress can actually help still stoke the fires of progress here.
Signs of hope.
I think so. I believe leadership generally is about a combination of reality and hope. And I think that's true in every part of my business life. I try to bring both elements. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of the progress, but don't let that be cloaked in this feeling that, oh, so you're satisfied with that. Well, of course, I'm not satisfied with that.
We talk about it in the context of organisations, but in terms of the decision-making that goes on at home, and obviously men can actually be male champions at home as well, because some of these conversations are the ones that are taking place in heterosexual relationships at the time when they have their first baby. What's your advice to men at home, new dads, having these conversations with their partners to start a new conversation when there are no role models within the organisation that they're returning to? Yes.
Well, in some ways, I think of myself as a role model champion in terms of don't do what I did. So I think that's the first thing I would say to new dads today. Don't do what I did. Like, I love fatherhood. I adore fatherhood. There are so many things I would do similarly, but there are some things I would do very differently in terms of shared workloads, in terms of the conversations that Pam and I could have had. And so I think you can be a champion, as in don't do what I did. Secondly, I think I can speak to just the joy of fatherhood. Like, you wouldn't want to ever miss out on that. And so I'd be saying to new dads today, take the time, have these conversations around choices, because this is, a lot of things flow from this, and it's great to live life with purpose and intent, and as the outcome of true choices that a partnership has made. And then lean into fatherhood, because it's just the most amazing thing. Like, when my kids laugh when I try to tell them that I changed 50% of nappies, well, actually, kind of wish I had changed 50% of nappies. I don't know what percentage I did. My wife will probably watch this video and be calling out a figure. All I'll tell you is it's less than 50%.
Probably one final question from me, and it is around privilege. We know that men do have more opportunities at the moment, and there is more privilege around that. What can we do, or what can men do to address that and to ensure that women are stepping up beside them?
Are you talking in a business context or in a life context? Life context, yeah. So I'd like to give you a deeper answer to that. I think that when I think of the human spirit, there's something very deep about the human spirit, and it's partnership, family, community. These are really strong words. This is not only what makes the world go round, sort of circle of life stuff, but it's the magic that we have in our worlds. And so for me, what's very deep in me is the way that I can connect in partnership with people, with my wife, with my family, and ultimately to serve. I think the human spirit is not to grab. When I think of people I know that are the grabbers and the greedy ones, I don't know that ultimately they've lived the most rich lives. When I think of the people that inspire me the most, it's the people that give, and the people that when they see a lack of privilege, that they try to do something about it. That's been deep in the way I've run my life as a humble little boy from the Adelaide Hills. And I would recommend to everyone that at its core, our lives should be lives of both leadership but service. To lead is to serve, and the deeper we do that, the more fulfilled we'll be, but the more impact we'll have on everyone around us that we love.
I think that's a great way to end our interview. Thank you so much
Pleasure.
for your time, Andrew.
Pleasure.